Welcome to the Town of Lumberland Heritage Day 2021. Today we will go around and look at various pictures within the town museum, and we will have a little talk about different phases of life in Lumberland. We'll begin with the architecture, and I'd like to impress it upon the varied forms of architecture in the town of Lumberland, beginning with the very early farmhouses that are present in Pandey, and some of the houses in Mangap on the Rio Dam Road. This happens to have been the Wilson residence. And then further up the street was another, more of a grand Victorian residence. And then in Glens Bay proper, this was a boarding house that William Brandt had built in the mid-1800s, maybe 1860-ish. And my grandfather, Frank Schwarz, bought this. This was their last residence, and that was located in the back of what is now known as Mangap Road. Further to the left here now, we see one of the original houses of the Morgan family. It was several different sides. I think it was probably a six-sided house. Very unusual architecture. And then as we go down to the bottom, we see a typical farmhouse in what was known as South Lebanon. Now, South Lebanon became Glens Bay at about 1870, 1880. George Russ Mckenzie, the president of Singer Sewing Machine Company, actually had the power to have the name change from South Lebanon to Glens Bay. So this is what was located on part of his property, which is at the Glens Bay Crossroads. It's probably just directly across the street from where the restaurant is located. There was a homestead of about 1820, 1830. Now, here is a missing link. This particular building, I believe, was known as the Proctor Theater. Now, prior to that time, it almost looks like it may have been a church. We have a couple of missing links in the town history. We're looking for actually a picture of the Lower Mangap Methodist Church. So this kind of appears like it may have been located on that point of Herring Road, which may have been the site of the Proctor Theater, but as of right now, that's hearsay. Okay, further up towards the left is a picture of the Kerr Residence. This currently has been undergoing restoration. Originally had a tower in the middle and was the residence of the Bisland family. And here is a picture, I believe, located somewhere up near where the Bisland Agency and the post office is now. It probably started out as an 1820s or 1830s farmhouse in the very front, and then as they added, the family increased, and it's possible that there may have been a boarding house there too. They often would add rooms on. Okay, so next we go to a building of the Maney family, and this was the last structure of the Maneys that was built about 1885. More of that grand Victorian nature. They got away from the 1830 farmhouses and created something more grandiose. Okay, We're going to next go to some of the occupations in Lumberland, and that being a sawmill. They were involved in lumbering. This, I believe, was located over on the Wilson Place, which would be on the Rio Dam Road. Some of the pastimes in Lumberland included hunting. These are some of the hunting clubs and many men that were involved in hunting. We're going to skip around here, and we will see some of the various sports, some winter sports, and they would saw ice blocks for the many ice houses for the ice boxes to keep the produce and meat cold. So this is at the Mckenzie Swan Pond. They were sawing ice for the ice house that was located there at about 1915. Down here you'll see a picture of my dad. He enjoyed raising the colts, and this was one of his prize colts. And he was involved with some of the original race horses when they did the racing in Monticello, prior to him becoming a town supervisor in the late 30s. Next to that is Doug Longspaw with one of his prize trout. That was another very famous pastime of the local people. Both men and women would like to go fishing in the many ponds and the many streams. Okay, next here we have a picture of Mr. and Mrs. George Ross Mackenzie with their son Alex in the 1860s, right down here at the Glens Bay Corners. The Corners was the approach to the Mackenzie Homestead, so there were many beautiful fences lining both the left and the right-hand side of the Glens Bay Corners, adjacent to their property. Here you're going to get a chance to witness a plaque of composers that was done by the sculptor, artist, Mr. George Beck of Eldred, New York. Now this was actually probably a commission piece at the time in 1916, and it's entitled A Teutonic Quartet, meaning Germanic, German composers. Wagner, Beethoven, Mendelssohn, and Mozart with their respective dates. Okay, so if you bear with me for a minute, we're going to go back over to some of the early homesteads. Here you're going to see a picture of the Drake Homestead. Darlene Haas was very much help to bring her display here today for our Town of Lumberland 2021 Heritage Day. And depicted are the many relatives, some of the earliest descendants from the area, Zephaniah Drake, 1736. And their residence was located up near the Rio Reservoir, the Drake Residence. Here's also the area known as Drake Town. There was a hotel actually there, and the picture shows part of a chimney that is still existent. Some of the graves that are located at the Lower Mangap Cemetery. Again, today is a virtual Heritage Day. If you wish to come into the museum, you may do so now. This had been planned many, many months prior that we would have the Heritage Day virtually. So the museum room is open at the Town Hall, Lumberland Town Hall, located at 1054 Proctor Road. The museum is open on Mondays from 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. You can call the town hall 856-8600 and press option number 8. Okay, here is the beginnings of the Rio hydroelectric energy plant. Orange and Rockland put out this booklet many years ago. I believe it was around 1985-86 that they did that. And there's a piece of the penstock located across from the town hall. There's also a very nice framed picture of the original penstock within the town hall. Again, here is some of the Warner farm. It shows a very early ice house. Some of the Drakes, a Howard Murray Drake, a Matilda Drake, Effie Mae Drake, Phoebe Warner Sutherland, John Zephaniah Drake, John Zephaniah holding his daughter Edna Mae Drake, and John Z. Drake in his later years. And actually, Darlene was so nice to bring this display that she has assembled on the Clan Sutherland. And along with that is the history and the Civil War letters of John Zephaniah Drake. We could go on and on reading this. I would say if there was any interest in this, then you could contact me at the museum room and we could see if a copy could be obtained. Next, you're going to see a very early painting, probably a watercolor, of an early bridge in Lumberland. Now, it's thought that this may be the actual bridge that was a link with Mangap and took the people up near the Drake Homestead. Okay, we're going to continue on now to Glens Bay. Here we are at the many estates of Mr. George Ross Mackenzie, who was the Singer Sewing Machine president, vice president, general manager, and at the time in 1884 he became president. So he really loved Glens Bay and kind of explored this area in the early 1860s, purchased the property, and came up by the depot in Pandey, and then later on decided to create some of his summer estates. It was really a grand summer estate known as the Homestead. Here's some of the roads located at the crossroads of Glens Bay. Here is the Mackenzie family at the Homestead. You'll note that he had a very large family. Here are some of the early roots of the Mackenzie family. To your far right is the actual house as it started, and then of course it went up to become 3 stories with another mansion built in the background by the time 1885. Here are the links to Singer Sewing Machine Company, the exhibition building in the Fair of Philadelphia in 1876. Now, later on, after George Ross Mackenzie's death, his children decided that they received their inheritance that their father had left to them to build summer mansions. So here is one of the oldest sons' mansion, Bel Air. It was perhaps the most grandiose structure in Lumberland. And when we talk about architecture, we have to be sure to include this one. And It had the finest rose garden. I would say it probably had the finest of everything known to man, but it was absolutely mammoth. Okay, going on, we see Mr. Mackenzie's Swan house. This picture I took actually in the early 1980s. It's our hope and wish that the owners will preserve this building and paint this and make it visible again to the public. Okay, here is another picture of Mr. Mackenzie's one of his oldest children's mansion, Voldcroft, and this remains on the camp property of Camp Hyacera in Glens Bay. Bel Air Lodge, which was the first gatehouse, the first building that was built for the Bel Air Mansion. And then we're going to go to, I think it was the oldest son, Alex Mackenzie's Windy Knoll estate. So it was a huge mansion, more Scottish or Moorish, with hardwood floors, and every convenience known to man. This was built in the late 1800s, about 1898. And here it shows a picture of his grandiose Windy Knoll Park on the lower road. That would be located is near the present Glens Bay Cemetery. Here's a picture of his magnificent observation tower, a tower that we see in books throughout New York State for fire towers. The Mackenzies had this kind of architecture to look over their entire estate. Further to the left is Ardmore, the residence of Francis Isaac Vanderbeek and Rebecca Mckenzie. And this building today is in a pretty good state of preservation and currently used for wedding receptions and weddings. Okay, so here we have a picture of the Ewing Mansion. That was located right next to Ardmore. And both of these buildings that I've been talking about, Ardmore and trying to think what the name is here, isn't that awful? But the two mansions next to the Ewing Mansion, they became part of the Ukrainian Workmen's Association. Next we go to the Elkin Mansion. This is now the home of Mike and Pat Frazee, Mike Frazee Sports Resort, Burnbrae Mansion. And I'm very pleased to announce that this is perhaps the only home that really underwent almost a total, they're getting there, almost a total restoration. Ardmore, many magnificent things happened in Ardmore in reconstruction, and but Burnbrae was the house that really had more restoration. Okay, here is a picture of the Craig home, Thornley Bank. This was located up beyond the Mackenzie homestead on the way Route 42 towards the post office. Here's a couple of pictures of the Glens Bay Church, the pulpit in the Glens Bay Church. This was also known as Glens Bay Hall. Here it is decked out. I believe they had a very big pulpit. And this other picture to the left shows a little section that almost looks like an organ over on the far left. However, George Russ Mackenzie was totally against organ music in churches, because he actually rescued a church that was in dire financial straits in Jersey City, and one of the stipulations was that no organ music would be allowed during the service. I guess they felt that that broke the actual mood for to witness the sermon or the message of the day. Okay, here we're going to go towards all the old cars in Lumberland. Here's some of the many cars lined up for the Mackenzies as they would venture up to their estates in Glens Bay. You probably will recognize the car in the middle as being this Cadillac for the Craig family. And that is a stone building that still exists on the property of the town of Lumberland. The roof had been raised in later years to accommodate some town machinery. But this was all part of the Craig estate, originally part of George Ross Mackenzie's estate. So here's a farm vehicle, a truck of the Windy Knoll farm, located right on the farm there at Windy Knoll. Here's Edward Mackenzie's Cadillac, located at his Mammoth Mansion. These were probably, I believe, 10-cylinder cars, maybe 12-cylinder cars. They probably would really be museum pieces today. This car is some form of a race car of the Elkin family. I couldn't tell you anything further. Probably a 12-cylinder car, 12-cylinder car. So here's another picture showing many of the entire estates coming up Route 41 to 42. That was an aerial shot. Here's a piece of furniture that was actually restored of George Ross Mackenzie's from his homestead. Here's the Edward Mackenzie family, as well as some members of the Alexander and the Elkin family when they had the family gathering at Bel Air at the top of the hill. I think you'll find this very interesting. This next photo was a town gathering at the Glens Bay Crossroads, which would be near the Mackenzie estate, or at that time the Alexanders. Mrs. Jessie Alexander was the youngest daughter who inherited the homestead. And they were having a gathering there, and they had brought a piano to celebrate, I believe, armistice or gathering. Town gathering way back in many years ago. Now, the Mackenzie family also used to picnic at Lake Medoc. This later on became known as Medoc Girl Scout Camp. Later on, the family sold to the Bergen County Girl Scouts. So here's some of the buildings in the lake, and this was an actual permit that the Mackenzies used to give for people if they wanted to fish, the local people that would help them. Again, they were cutting ice on the Homestead Pond. Some of these are two brothers, the Longspore brothers, cutting ice to be stored in the ice house that you see in the back. Also very influential in the Singer sewing machine was William Fash Proctor. He built an estate known as Brookwood Farm in Glens Bay, and this is the actual original mansion that was designed by Henry Janeway Hardenberg. Here is a gatehouse for the Proctor estate. Here's actually some fine sewing that Belle Mackenzie did on a very small miniature Singer sewing machine. And I have to include the Glens Bay Golf Course, which is the area that the Mackenzie School, part of the Mackenzie School was built on. This was donated to the school district from the town of Lumberland. The town of Lumberland only really received the ownership of the property in 1976. And when the school opened in 1995, prior to that, the town of Lumberland had donated the acreage for the school to be built. At that time that they did put a covenant around the grove of trees, belongs to the town of Lumberland, as well as the historic site, the stone mounds. There are 2 stone mounds that have been cordoned off with a fence, and there is historic marker at the site. Here's a very early photo of the Mckenzie property. Years ago, Lumberland was known for its prize farms. So this is the area that's where Circle Park is located right now. It was very open, it was farmland, it was pasture, it seems very fitting today that the town has a park there. Again, some of the early residents, the estate of George Russ Mckenzie. I believe I shot this once before I came to it, but I wanted you to see the actual barn. The actual barn became known as a restaurant in the 40s and 50s, known as the Glens Spa. And then later on it became the Orchard Inn and Michael's and the Glens Bay Country Inn. So I'm going to go over and show you some of the the menu for the Orchard Inn. And it really was a great place to gather in around 1985. Of course, Tony Warnicki and Donna had the antique shop, and the entire Orchard Inn was decorated with magnificent 18th and 19th century antiques. Here is a picture showing the Glens Spa in earlier times before it became the Orchard Inn. And then there's a news article here that talks when Tony's nephew Michael had the restaurant. That was a little bit later on. Okay, so a very important part of Lumberland is the fire department. Here's one of the first fire trucks that's still in the fleet, more on the line of historic. And here's some of the original firemen located with that particular truck. Here's some of the boarding houses in Lumberland, the Longspaw boarding house, which was located on the way towards Lower Mangap, but it was actually just out of the hamlet of Glens Bay. Here is the Albernus farm when they were doing haying. This would have been located off of the White Road in Glens Bay. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the Lumberland family tree. Many towns branched from Lumberland, which was created March 16th, 1798. Of the branches, we have the towns of Bethel, Callicoon, Tustin, Delaware, Highland, Fremont, Coshocton, and Liberty, all branching from the large town of Lumberland. Here's a very interesting layout of all the different plots or the trails at Mohegan Lake, and an early picture of Mohegan Lake. Going on, we see the picture of the Millbrook Inn. This is not the original building. This would have been the second building because, no, I think this was probably the original building, and then because it suffered a fire, and then they had to rebuild it. So, and it was known as Dick Mackey's. Here is the original Pandey railroad station before they built the small railroad station in the early 1890s. This is a very early picture of that period from the 1850s through the 1880s. The Pandey bridge that was put in 1900 after the pumpkin flood, and there was a picture here that shows a $10 fine for for driving over this bridge faster than a walk. And some of the original pier bolts and markers of the original bridge. Now that bridge was replaced with a structure that was very similar to, in historical context, just recently replaced. So we have some archives of the Pandey Bridge as well as an oil painting within the Town of Lumberland Museum Room. So if you wish to visit the museum room, you can see some more of these artifacts. Next, I think it's important to include a country store in Pandey and what it actually looked like. This was Manny's. Manny built this store in Pandey. It was the last structure actually to be built during the D&H Canal. And that era went from like the late 1820s, 1829 to 1898. So this was built in the latter period, that late 1890s. Now, a much earlier tavern and rooming house, Jacob Ports's Tavern, which would have been in that area near the Pandey Bridge, just opposite where we know as Nolan's Restaurant. I'm going to move around here and show you some more pictures of the canal. On the approach to Pandey from Mangap, here's actually a picture of the old canal, the D&H Canal. Here's a picture of Rixton's Riverside Hotel coming by right by the bridge. We have a couple of Rixton bottles, or the old bottles, within the Town of Lumberland Museum collection. Here's another bridge tender's house, or I believe it's a bridge tender's house because further down there's a lock as well. This would actually take you up on Berm Church Road in Pandey. Here you can actually see the canal, and later you can see that the structures, including the small white Pandey Methodist Church. Some of the favorite pastimes in that canal era, including today, would be canoeing or boating on the Delaware River. Here's some other structures, some other boats on the Delaware. And then there's an interesting old stone hotel that when we talked about architecture, that's very significant, that 1830s, 1840s stone hotel right there on Pandey there. Here's some old water books from the Town of Lumberland, 1887, I believe it is. Some old assessment books from the Town of Lumberland. They go way, way back to the McKechnies, Mackenzies, the Mannies, etc. Here's an old town highway time account book. They had to keep track of all the men and where they worked and so forth. for the town of Lumberland. This is in the 40s, like through 1946. Again, there's that stone hotel, a picture from the riverside. Okay, next we're going to go over to one of the last tables and talk about a topic that's actually new. A lot of you probably wouldn't recognize that we actually had a Glens Bay Fair at one time. This shows the Farmers Club. They were issued a first premium for their to Ardmore Farm for the Glens Bay Fair. Now the Glens Bay Fairs were from 1913, 1914, and 1915. Those were the 3 years that they actually had an agricultural fair here in Glens Bay, which was located on the Glens Bay Golf Course. Here's some pictures of the tents. Here's another, the band, they actually had a band that came in from Port Jervis and played for the fair. Here's some of the prize cattle that were entered into the contest to win the prizes. Here's the actual fair. Impressed upon the actual picture was the fair, Glens Bay, September 1913. And here you can see some of the many things that they had for sale. And in that right-hand corner, they were selling Draft chocolates and all different sorts of commodities. So that's a very important part of the Glens Bay heritage, that there was actually a very large fair held here for agriculture. Who would think today that there was so much agriculture? But that's what consisted of this area. Early homesteads and early farms. Next, we're going to go to the one-room schoolhouses. Again, a very important phase of the town heritage. Here we are at the town hall. It was South Lebanon Schoolhouse at the time, before it became known as the Glens Bay Schoolhouse. This was a joint project of William Fash Proctor and George Ross Mackenzie. The original structure was built in the 1830s, and it was much to be desired, and so they tore it down and built this magnificent East Lake one-room schoolhouse, a very large structure for the area. Here are some of the children at the turn of the century outside of the town hall. And here's some of the school cards, souvenirs of the pupils. Some of the other schools in Lumberland, the Hillside School, which has recently gone through a lot of restorations. Over in Hillside, here's an early school card from there. And as we go here, the Upper Mangap School, now for many, many years, a private residence. That's Upper Mangap School. And here was an actual school card, which actually had some names of some of my relatives. My Uncle Mass, my Uncle Emery Getz, Eugene Getz. Okay, also on the order of a East Lake schoolhouse is the Pandey Schoolhouse. Now, it's unknown whether George Ross Mckenzie and Mr. Proctor did both of these buildings. In other words, paid for both of these schoolhouses to be built. They were like a mirrored image of oneself, being Glens Bay was located at the end of the road, and the Pandey Schoolhouse was located at the other end of Hollow Road. So it's possible, but I have yet to encounter the documentation on it. Lower Mangap also had a schoolhouse. In later years it became a family residence. And then here's a picture collage of some of the many homes in Lower Mangap. Now, this Mangap, I'm talking about the town of Lumberland. I'm not talking about the Mangap Valley that went all the way up further beyond Rio, etc. Now, Lebanon Lake Schoolhouse, that was also located in the town of Lumberland. Many years ago, the town board decided to close this, like in the 1930s. My father at that time was the supervisor, and it was determined that they should close it because there was only one student actually going to school there. Here's an early postcard that the town museum acquired, and it's really the only picture within the museum collection that shows actually children at that site. Here's a Mr. Lenahan, who was the teacher. Probably a very stern gentleman, very stern teacher, but he was the teacher at the Lebanon Lake Schoolhouse. Okay, then I'm going to focus on a news article, When Lumberland Rings in Another Century. Okay, this was taken, and we preserved the news article that came from the Gazette, and it highlighted restoring the Glens Bay Town Hall bell tower, also the Glens Bay School, which we talked about a little while ago. We actually found some old photographs, and Bob Dodrus, an architect from Liberty, was most helpful in drawing up the plans for us, actually gratis he did. And then we had a local gentleman who's pictured here, Walter Majar, who actually built the bell tower in less than a weekend. I remember talking to him and providing some pieces of fretwork which came from another Mckenzie structure. And he said, "Oh, I have the tower all done. Come by and see how it looks." So I went there several times over the period of time to take a look at it before it was ready to come up to the town hall. And at that time, the Bicentennial Committee was involved in that, and we had a grand installation on September, I believe it was the 5th, September 5th or September 9th, we had a field day. So I'm going to go over to the other table now and talk a little bit more about the old buildings, and once more focus on some of the architecture. A great percentage of this architecture remains in town. Some is lost. But it is up to us as citizens to preserve our heritage. So I would encourage you, being the town historian, and my work here has included some 36 years of work with this and the town heritage. What you can preserve, if there is a possible way that you can preserve this architecture, whether it be if you become an owner, or when you're first coming into Lumberland and then you desire to buy a house, it's up to you. It's here, what architecture is left? We've lost so much architecture within the town of Lumberland. So it's up to you to preserve it for future generations, and I would highly encourage that. So I'm going to leave you today, and today you did not actually see me. You heard me talking as I went around to all these pictures. And I hope you have had an interesting time with our virtual Heritage Days. From now on, hopefully the pandemic is pretty much, we hope, will be over with, but we have to be careful. So the Town Museum, located at 1054, the historic Glens Schoolhouse, which you are in today, also known as Lumberland Town Hall, is open to the public to come in and view the museum room. We are now open Mondays from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. You can always call the Town Hall, 856-8600. We do not allow large groups to come in with buses. So any individuals or small gatherings could come in, but you should first contact the historian. Again, it's been a privilege and an honor to serve as the town historian, and I hope that you have encountered as much history today from Lumberland that will lead to future encounters with our heritage. Have a great day.